Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man Season 1, Episode 8. Another great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're picking up in the aftermath of last episode, and this is kind of Peter's low point after everything. I mean, God, being taken to a medical wing, an experimental medical wing in Oscorp, even the doctor being like, oh my God, he's just a kid. It's like the mask didn't come off or anything like that, but it's almost kind of similar to the reaction in Spider-Man 2 when like Peter didn't have his mask on. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, I always have to preface that, and people saw like how young he was. I think there's other versions. I feel like there's something else, another adaptation or something I saw where people were like, oh my God, he's just a kid. I want to say it's 2. Like, even though like that was Peter at like a college age or whatever, but he was still like fairly young. You know, even though Toby wasn't that age, but still, the character of Peter Parker in that was still fairly young. I think people have been like, oh yeah, like he's just a kid pretty much, you know. So, but no one knows Peter's identity, obviously. But he's recovering. He got jacked up. I guess I knew about Peter having like a rapid like healing factor, but I mean, obviously it's not a Wolverine or Deadpool level healing factor, but he, has a very, very high, healing factor. And I guess I don't always think about that. I also do like the I don't comment on them like I should. I do like the changes to the opening, especially like kind of like that splash page kind of final shot of the opening that they do, and the little changes that they've made over the course of the season. Not only that, but even including like going from Peter's homemade suit to like the Future Foundation-esque suit that he has. Just kind of like the base version of like just a non-colored version of like his base suit. But either way, but this one being like a very iconic, I think it's the cover of a comic, an issue. I don't think it's like, maybe it's straight from inside a page from the comic, but I feel like I think I've seen that comic cover of like the suit in the trash can and Peter walking away. I was like, oh, that's neat. I'm sure, I mean, there's little winks and nods all over the place, but I thought that was a really nice touch. It's not him fully thinking about giving up Spider-Man, but it's him finding out this is where this last arc, this going into the last 2 episodes, is kind of setting up this arc of what it really means to be Spider-Man, And for him really weighing that responsibility. He always knew there was a responsibility, but for the first time, he was kind of balancing everything okay-ish, not great, but okay. But this is like the first time it all came crashing down. Because yes, he struggled against villains. This is the first time he was ever trounced. He felt like powerless. And for him, it's like, if I'm not out there doing anything, any victims of Scorpion going forward are on me. And then you have the very like Norman approach to it, where he's just kind of like, you are holding back, and the villain like Scorpion, the bad guys are not going to hold back. So you need to stop trying to hold back as well. And that is the thing about Peter, like very much in like the Superman case as well. Those are 2 characters who are constantly holding back because they don't want to kill or hurt anybody. And it's like, but you'll never reach your full potential. And for Norman, it's like, that's the Spider-Man I need. It's just like, a little bit of his true colors coming out of just like, unless you're giving it your all, like he's not giving you some great pep talk. He's kind of like, I mean, he gave the speech, but like a very different version of it. Instead of, with great power comes great respect. That's not the morals that Peter should be taken away from this. And even he's feeling conflicted about that. But it's like, that's how Norman operates. With great power comes great respect. Once again, we still don't know the Octavius of it all, what their history is in this continuity. Like, once again, I still believe all the stuff he said about Octavius. Some of it's true about the ego and aggravated at Norman's success, but it could also just be Norman, like, screwed him over and took a lot and made it under his name. Once again, we don't know the full story, but that's I keep referencing the fact is I feel like, because Norman's Norman. Once again, I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt early in the season. Like, maybe he's not going to be evil in the season. Nope. I mean, he hasn't gone full-blown evil, but he's definitely like I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, and I won't be able to put it in words, the feeling I have towards Norman about where the direction he's going, where it's like, you're not evil per se, but you're just kind of a little self-centered, egotistical, like megalomaniac like esque, where it's just like you were so consumed with power and position that consumes you. That's also motivating why you didn't have Peter's back last episode, because you're so focused on going after Otto, because you're not necessarily looking for the greater good. You're looking for what's the greater good for yourself. You're trying to benefit you. Once again, you're at the top. You're going to do some shady stuff to stay at the top. Cross some very, very morally gray, if not just very dark moral boundaries and stuff like that. But Peter's doubting himself, about this whole situation. I mean, when he ends up talking to May, like, she's like, "What happened to you?" He's like, "No, it's fine. I was on a skateboard, I fell." And she balked the lie, but for her, it's just like, you can't just like go and not tell me what's up with you after everything that's happened, And for her, it's like, I love you too, and I'm glad that I'm living with you. But she's like, I feel like Ben would be a better role model for you. You are growing up so fast, and I just don't think I could be there for you the way Ben could have been. But for Peter, it's like, I appreciate everything that you've ever done for me, man. I love you too. And it's just, he's crumbling under the weight of just like, he feels like he's failing so many people. He feels like he's disappointing Norman, because Norman's kind of that role model figure for him, and it's like, oh, I'm disappointing him. Then there's also the situation of like, me and Nico aren't good. That's my best friend. It's just, he feels kind of alone, and that weight, it was already a lot to carry, and it just, in this moment when he's at his lowest, it's crushing him. Just using, it's metaphorically the same thing as when he was in Homecoming. The whole, once again, I referenced it last episode, when he's under all of that rubble. It's that same thing. It's just happening to him metaphorically in this regard. Because it's interesting, because like, at least Tony gave Peter the whole conversation of, if you're nothing without the suit, then maybe you don't deserve the suit. That was a whole like lesson Peter had to learn in Homecoming. Like, you thinking you're nothing without the suit, and he, because but he's not like that in this, because he's like, well, I don't have the suit. I'll put on any other suits that's available if it means that I can help people. Like, I'll do whatever. But it's like, no, that's not, the world needs Spider-Man, but not as you are. You need to get better. You need to be stronger. You need to be fiercer. Like, he's twisting that knife to try and, he wants Peter to be him, but Peter's not him. And that's, even though it hasn't turned into a issue between him and Harry, but it does seem like, right, he feels like Peter, but also it's not even just on a personal level. It's also because I think he's playing into whatever it is he's trying to, the deals he's making with Ross and the government, where he's trying to, like, once again, I guess almost pimp like Peter out. You did notice that they did draw his blood, and he was like, yeah, don't do that. I was like, yeah, that's going to be an issue. The last person you want to have your blood is Norman/Oscorp. And you see later on, they're bringing in a whole bunch of animals. So they're trying to replicate the powers Peter had with different animals. So like trying to, like, so that's what Norman's probably doing. He's trying to make his own kind of pseudo super soldier program, and heroes of his own making, where it's like, well, Peter's failing me. He's the interim right now, and then eventually, like, I'll bring in other people who are more qualified, and they'll be right under my thumb. They'll be my like, yeah, this kid's wishy-washy, but like, and I got him, under my strings to puppeteer, but other people I have better control of. It's going to be necessary, more experienced people to be who I need them to be, who I want them to be. Or not, unless he wants Peter, because he is trying to build an Avengers-esque new generation of heroes. So he could be looking for Peter to lead his squad. But yeah, that's definitely what he's got set up. But yeah, like Peter, like, even feels like he's letting down Dr. Connors, because it's like, well, a lot of his projections and stuff like that, even Whitman had to be like, all right, they're adequate. So, but he's like, yeah, like, everything Peter was saying was right, but he wasn't there to help out Dr. Connors with it. It just feels like he's letting just everyone down, and he's beating himself up about it. He has PTSD. I mean, that nightmare he had of, like, Scorpion stomping him out, plus, everyone he cares about, Nico, Lonnie, Pearl, even Norman, all getting wrapped up about, like, yeah, because the Scorpion's still out there. Like, what am I doing? He's doubting himself, and that doubt is petrifying him. And so he's drowning in that worry about, like, everything that's happening. So while he waits, it's like, that just makes him, like, even more anxious and just crushing him even more. Because, like, the more I'm sitting here doubting myself, the more I'm feeling more and more powerless as he's doing his thing. He ends up meeting up with Pearl because they have a class assignment to do. But This situation is kind of an awkward situation because it's definitely like, you know, where Lonnie and Pearl are going to end up, because sadly that's not going to work out. But you're like, I don't know if the whole her and Peter thing is going to be where that kind of goes or not. But it seemed like this situation did kind of let them sort of, you know, get closer in a regard. Just kind of like how Harry and Nico did last episode. I guess Harry trying to keep Pete's secrets, because he knows like last thing I need to do is tell Nico, because I was thinking like, oh, maybe Harry would tell Nico, but he's already kind of going through that where he's like, yeah, I'm not going to tell Nico. Like, Pete's going to tell her if he wants her to know, but it's like she doesn't know like her best friend. Like, despite them being on the outs, she would still want to know what Pete's going through. He did leave her a message, so I wonder will she hear it in the next. I'd assume she's going to hear it within the next 2 episodes, but it's just like she's upset right now, and it's just, you know, he doesn't have his best friend by his side during all of this, so it's a lot to handle. Now he's hearing the whole Lonnie situation, because Lonnie, you know, the 1/10 kind of scattered afterwards, but, you know, Lonnie still wants to ride with them, because it's like, these are people who made me feel okay, who are promising to look after me and my community, like especially my family, so I've got to like support them. You know, it's like a cult where it's just kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna lure you in. Like, I don't have your best interest at heart. I mean, maybe it is a thing of like, we look after this neighborhood, but it's for self-interest purposes. Like, you look after the neighborhood because it benefits you. Do you really care about the people in it? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Or maybe that's just sweet nothings you whisper into their ears of your members just to kind of get their loyalty to you. Once again, it's like there's that direct parallel between Norman and Donovan, like their approach to, you know, how Norman is approaching Peter versus how Donovan is approaching Lonnie. And Lonnie's, you know, for a while has kind of got suckered into Donovan's words, whereas Peter hasn't quite going down the route. Even though he listened to a lot of what Norman says, he still hasn't fully committed down the path like Lonnie has down his path in a lot of ways. So, and Peter tried to stop Lonnie. He's like, please don't do this. But Lonnie's like, yo, it's help protect my family. And the fact is, I get it, but like, just don't get in my way. So I wonder, will this be a situation where eventually, because I was wondering if Peter would reveal his identity to Lonnie. It's like, I was there, I helped you out, but it's just kind of like he couldn't and didn't in that moment. That also played into his apology to Nico, where he's like, I should have told you about it, but he's just like, it happened so fast, and he's just, I didn't know what to do, so like, I'm doing it now. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I should have told you my secret. You have Octavius, which I love that little bit between him and Vince. And Vince is like, are you playing that game again? He was like, well, yes, because the devs haven't found the like oh god, what's the word I'm looking for? The exploit that I found, you know, and I'm just wasting time. He's like, well, have you eaten? He's like, yes. He's like, well, I could get you some. He's like, I'm a grown man, so yes, I have. Of course I have. He's like, well, I could get you something. He's like, well, I won't decline that, but that we won't speak until then. I'm like, I love how childish he is in that moment. But yeah, the SWAT team rolls up because, oh, you broke the Soviet Accords. You're under arrest. He doesn't have the tentacles directly on his body, but he has them in his warehouse, and he's got all that machinery to mess with them. He's got all that tech. I even love he's got that bow staff he's spinning around. He even hits himself. I do love like the villainy, like comedic bit, because also he's like he's Otto Octavius, but he hasn't become Doc Ock yet, like fully. So it's the time frame to have those silly little bits in there. I'm curious how people would feel about that. But yeah, he ultimately gets caught, not by necessarily Ross, but you know, Tony rolls up, which is interesting because like once again, the time between Civil War and because the only thing that I was trying to remember, like between Civil War and Infinity War, I believe the only thing that came out was Black Panther, if I remember correctly. So what I mean is like I don't remember if the Soviet Accords had really any effect on Wakanda. I don't think it did. I mean, Wakanda was, you know, hidden away. It's like, oh, it's known, but like, you know, it deceived the world of what Wakanda really is. So I don't think we never really got to see like Tony under the Accord, and we see him working with Ross, and it's like, oh, this is him kind of working alongside the government, doing stuff with him. It's like they busted Octavius, so, which is interesting too because Dimitri shows up later on, and it wasn't until he showed up I was like, Chameleon? And then I heard the voice, I was like, oh, Dimitri. I was like, because I was like, I didn't look the rest of the crew up, but I was like, well, considering two of you are like specific supervillains, I'm like, the other two have to be as well. So Dimitri is Chameleon. So it's like, oh, that's interesting, because he's just wearing the stuff to like hide his identity, which I think is supposed to also be the irony, where it's like you're a man who kind of loses his identity to become other people type of thing. So I think that's probably the irony behind it. But it's like, which I can only assume his power isn't going to be like as mutation. I mean, because it seems like it doesn't seem like it's tech based. It does seem like it's just like mutation based. Like like I said, a lot of these powers were kind of mutation based, some of them, and now it seems like we're making them tech based. It seems like that's the approach. This is tech. I mean, maybe Chameleon's situation has always been tech based, but I haven't always. I don't know. Just kind of like Mysterio is very like illusions, and I guess it's like, but they leaned into it, making it like heavy tech based MCU was. To be fair, it's like the MCU leans way more into the more grounded science fiction of it all versus like the more heavy, like out there fantastical and fantasy sci-fi that is like Marvel, the comics and stuff in that world. So I don't know. So it makes me wonder, like, I probably have to go back, but I'm like curious, like, who the other woman is too amongst the crew. If we've got Rhino, Unicorn, and Chameleon, so she's got to be some kind of creature. Got to say, because I was like, right, Unicorn. I was like, oh, not an animal, but yeah. But yeah, he ends up giving Donovan the whole thing about Octavius's stuff, and well, we know like the government like snatched that up at his warehouse and stuff. So I was about to say, kind of the best but worst time to get that info. I guess that's going to play into, and I brought that up previously. I figured the end result would be like, oh, Octavius would help them out, and that would lead to Lonnie becoming Tombstone. But I'm curious to see how that plays out, because I thought they were going to go to Octavius like to themselves, and he would help them because he has no allegiances in this situation. He's doing what's benefiting him. But it's like, no, like the tech is being transported. We hear later on there's a hijacking going on. So I guess they hijacked one of like the trucks or vehicles that's transporting that stuff. So the rest of the gang was kind of reluctant after the whole Scorpion situation, but now like Lonnie's the one that kind of supercharged her, be like, nah, we got this, we got this. He's kind of leading the charge, and for Donovan, it's like, yeah, that's my number one soldier. I can count on him. So when the time comes, rather than Donovan probably doing it himself, he'll probably make Lonnie take the experimental thing that will turn him into Tombstone and forever screw him up, probably, because we are dealing with gamma radiation that even Pete said himself, like, it's going to forever like mess up your skin, and like it could bound to your skin and stuff. So I think that's what the end result will potentially be in this regard. So then we had the Harry and Peter of it all, as I was talking about before, like about the whole, like, maybe Harry might have a contentious relationship with Peter because of his father's love and intention, but it's like, yo, I'm part of Team Spider-Man, but then like his dad gave him the boot, and it's just like, yeah, just kind of, you need to stop holding back, Peter. And Pete has that conversation with Harry, and Harry's like, yeah, my dad was right, but that's how my dad got to where he is. What's right for my dad isn't right for Spider-Man. It's up to you to kind of choose what that means to you, how you want to use that power and go about it. I was like, oh, is Harry going to give him the speech? But it's like, no. And I'm curious if Peter's going to take what Osborn said and give his own spin, and he kind of ends up giving this speech, which I think is going to be interesting if that's the route they go. Not unless they go the MCU route and give it to May, which I don't think they will, but because that's also coming from a situation where May has known about Peter being Spider-Man versus this one where she doesn't. So who knows? We'll see. I mean, obviously the Ben speech predated, the whole him being Spider-Man thing, because it's like before, Ben knew and stuff like that, but that was from Ben, and in No Way Home, it came out as, I mean, kind of interestingly enough, around kind of a similar thing where, Peter wanted to kind of go ham against Goblin after like he killed Aunt May. So it's kind of like Peter might be in a similar boat. I mean, not the motivations won't necessarily, I mean, the motivations are somewhat the same, but he's not driven by revenge. It's more like I need to put you, like, I'm gonna hurt you because I need to do this for the greater good type of situation. So that's going to be interesting to see if the next two episodes tackle that. I think the next episode in particular will really lean into that, but we'll see how it all shakes up and plays out. But what I think is interesting too is that Harry says, go get him, Tiger, which I'm like, ooh, I'm curious how people are going to feel about that. The Aunt May giving the whole with greater power comes great power, great responsibility speech. Harry being the one that says Tiger, which, obviously that's typically associated with MJ, Mary Jane, but it's interesting giving that to Harry, because who knows if they're going to do an MJ in this continuity, because he might just have different love interests, which he had some. I was looking, I heard someone talk about this. I think Pearl is actually someone from the comics more recently, apparently, which I just looked it up. I didn't see any dates specifically where she's from in the comics. The pictures I saw seem to be from more recent stuff, but whatever the case may be. I looked into it. She is a super powered person in the comics too, which I'm like, oh man, just once again, this show is riddled with them. Not just like, there are very few just regular people. I mean, everyone's somebody from like the comics, but even then, it's just like, there's not just like regular people. Like the closest you'll get is probably Harry and Norman, but even they're not regular, considering like, well, Norman, because a Green Goblin, sometimes Harry does too. So that's a whole thing. So either way. But getting back to the point I was saying, like, I don't know if like they'll end up having a Mary Jane in this or not, but we'll just kind of see how everything shakes out in the next episodes. It's going to be interesting. Oh yeah, I completely forgot the other point I wanted to make too, and that is Harry basically hooked Peter up with what is going to be the more traditional suit. It's like, yo, like, you talked about having more color in the suit, so I had some text working on it with your designs from your sketchbook and your notebook as the basis for it. So Spider-Man rises again, so it's going to be interesting to see, like I said, where this all takes us. Next 2 episodes, they dropped today at the time of me recording this. I'm playing catch up right now, so I'm kind of, for the most part, caught up. Hopefully I get to these episodes today as well. But either way, excited to see how the season ultimately ends up wrapping up with this next 2 episodes. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.